is heroin?
Like the drug?
Heroin is a drug that affects the mind and the body, and it destroys both the mind and the body.
It's a highly addictive, terrible drug. I don't think it has any respect for people. It just, whoever it's available to, that's who it's affecting.
My answer to that question would be heroin is a very addictive drug that is ruining and destroying a lot of people's lives and very easy to get a hold of now.
It's a killer. It's a life destroyer.
I'm a mom, and heroin stole my dreams, my hopes, my child.
I'm a mom and a police officer, and heroin has affected me in both areas, through family members, through the community, and through our interaction with the public.
I think for those who are dealing with someone who's overdosed from heroin, I've seen it in my son's situation when he's overdosed. 2 of the times he overdosed, that he was left because the people he were with were on probation for drug charges. And their concern at that point was not necessarily, not saying that they didn't care that he had overdosed, but their concern was more for their well-being and, whether or not they were going to go back to jail. One of those times, it was a family member. It was a cousin that he grew up as a sister with, but again, it came back to that whole worry that she was going to go back to jail because she was on probation. And again, that just shows the magnitude and the power of that particular drug, because had she been in her right state of mind without the drug, she would never have done that. But that, again, the drug lies to you and says, oh, don't sit there, don't wait, you're going to go to jail, don't think about that person that's like your brother laying there. You've got to think about yourself first. And that happened in 2 different instances for him. I don't think that people that are in that social realm that are doing heroin or drugs, I don't think they understand that there's a law called the Good Citizen Law, where they cannot go to jail if they're with someone and they call the police. I don't think that that's still really publicized. And there's such distrust that the drug creates, that even I think some of the people that do know that still don't trust that. They see, again, law enforcement as the opposition, not that they're there to help them.
And one more thing to that, can you speak to that place where it comes down to, I think in your video you just said tough love. And
I will tell you, and tough love is the hardest thing. That's the first thing I want to put out there. If you're a parent and we're taught that our job is to protect our child, to make sure they're safe, to make sure that they're taken care of, and you have to use tough love, it's the absolute hardest thing you will ever do in that child's life. It's not easy to look at your child and say, no, I can't take you into my home because you're using drugs. And I look back in my whole interaction with my son and his addiction, and I have thought about that. Was tough love the right choice? Was that the right decision? Absolutely. Because had I not done that and continued to enable him, his demise would have just come sooner. He would have overdosed sooner. I would have made it a whole lot easier for him. But there is a lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame with that, because you look at yourself and you think, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong as a parent? And I've had a lot of nasty things said to me since my son died. I had a gentleman say that if my son started using drugs at 13, what did I do wrong as a parent? And I look back and did everything I thought was right to keep him involved in sports in school, and to specify, morals, and to give him goals to reach as far as being a good student, getting your homework done, having consequences for your actions. And so, I think as a parent for a lot of years, I didn't say anything early in his addiction because I didn't want people to do exactly that. Look at me and say, what did you do wrong? There was a lot of guilt. when my son became 18, because I was the reason he received his first felony charge. And I'm going to tell you, as a mother, to see your child sitting in the back of a police car crying because you called the police because you'd given tough love and he was at your house, and say, I don't want him here. And then for the police officer to come in and search him to put him in a police car and he had drugs on him, knowing I caused that first felony after I had just a month before that said, when you reach 18, stop doing the drug. If you can, get help. You don't want a felony charge. It will follow you the rest of your life. And then to turn around and be that parent that turned him in, that gave him that first felony charge, that's hard. It's something that I've had to look back on and reflect on. But again, I think, I did the right thing at that time. And, there were many times that I would pray for God to break his will and he would get caught with drugs and go back to jail. And as a parent, it's not the job for the correction officers and the judicial system to be babysitters for these adult people using drugs. But at the same time, you have that sense of relief when they're behind bars because they're safe. They can't get the drug. They're not on the street. They can't have a dealer calling them every 5 or 10 minutes saying, hey man, I've got something in, it's really good. I'll give you a little bit to try. And, just that whole craziness and insanity that is the addictive lifestyle.
So if you want to address that first part of just the side of law enforcement dealing with the public on that.
And of course, we're in Kentucky, and in the early months of 2015, Governor Beshear at that time had enacted stiffer penalties on people that were bringing in the more particularly the drugs, but more particularly the heroin, stiffer penalties for them, and especially if they brought them across the state lines. But also in that time frame that he enacted a bill called the Good Samaritan Law, which gave immunity to people that called in law enforcement or even the ambulance to respond to places that these people were overdosing. So, once we arrive, and we know that whenever someone calls in a person that is overdosed, we know what we're going to find. We're probably going to find drugs. We're probably going to find people. We're probably going to find people that are high. We're probably going to find the drug itself and the needles or whatever paraphernalia that they use. But our main goal is to get that person help. We assist the ambulance personnel with doing what we can. And so we don't want people to fear calling us. I think fear has killed a lot of people. So in doing so, I don't want them to think, we in law enforcement do not want people to stop, calling the police, because you should look at that person overdosing as if that's a person having a heart attack. You're going to assist them in getting them help. Call 911. Don't worry about the repercussions of what's going to happen. Get that person the help that they need. And then, in turn, a lot of the fear comes from if they do call the police, then they're going to be called a rat, to the drug dealer, or the drug dealer is going to, have repercussions against them for calling. And then also, if they do call, then they also know that now their family knows that they are also addicts. So they've got to learn to deal with that. But we, as law enforcement, don't want them to fear anything. Let us get in there and do our job and to help get them safely, to the hospital.
What would be your advice to a loved one or a family member when it comes to dealing with or getting them help from your perspective? What would be your advice to that person?
My first advice would be to love them, but to not enable them to get that drug. They're going to use all kinds of excuses. Mom, I'm hungry. Mom, I need clothes. Mom, I don't have deodorant. Mom, I've got to go to the doctor. Can you give me money to pay the copay? Mom, I've got a sore throat and I need medicine. So, never enable them. You don't want to give them the money that they are saying they need for food. You don't want to give them the money for the food, and then they in turn go out and buy that one dose, and that very well could be in the dose that you gave them money for that they have killed themselves with. But that's hard. That's very hard for parents. You know, when my child tells me they're hungry, my instinct is to feed them. And you know, you just have to not enabling them, and that it's harder to do. It's better, you know, it's harder to do than it is to say it, because you know, you can tell them all the time, don't enable them. If they've got a car, that's their way of getting, you know, their drug, and 9 times out of 10 parents their names are on the vehicle. The insurance is being paid by the parents, and so whenever they see that their child is on drugs, they're enabling them to have that transportation to get to that drug and take their car from them. You know, their phones. A lot of parents will pay for their phones up until they're 30 or 40 years old. You know, stop paying for the phones. Stop giving them money. But love them, and love them, and just let them know that no matter what they do, that they are still your child and you love them.